helped incredibly bit with the class. And so there's that book by Floyd Cunningham. I believe he's related to the GS, but I'm not sure. But in that book, there's three major things that are problems, and the rest of it's, not going to be a problem. They get distracted. I think I told you guys that last time I talked about it. The whole second half is like how the church is globalized, so it's kind of drawn out, and basically it proves why we've lost our center focus here in power, and that we have a lot of foreign general superintendents instead of having the generals that we once had. You know what I'm saying? That was more focused here, and I'm not sure that's good, because unless you have like American people leading this, they might not care for America when decisions are made for the church. You see what I'm saying? And so that's kind of one thing, but it's background. But the bigger problems are self-evident. I told you guys page 10 of the book, he hauls up and he says, our cardinal doctrine. I've never heard anybody say this, okay? So I don't know how you can publish that and just like smear out 100+ years of our church existence and say something else, okay? But he says, the cardinal doctrine of the Church of Nazarene is regeneration, and that the distinguishing doctrine of the Church of Nazarene is entire sanctification.
See, we're not different than anybody else.
Yeah.
We're mainstream, that's what that is.
Yeah. So that's a major thing. And then the second major thing is that, which is more about what we're talking about this morning, is he says, you got to remember, one of the authors is the racer man, who wrote The Second Coming. There's a book with Dunning, so he wrote The Second Coming, and that whole book is against our view of end times. So Racer's already there. So I don't know if he was the main culprit in that part of it, but it's almost like the number one thesis of the book is to try to kill pre-trib, premillennialism, and then throw out the baby with the bathwater and make everybody, they're going to get a lot of wrong history, and I'm going to crack one of the major points today. Matter of fact, I destroyed it today. So it's going to be fun, okay, in Sunday school. And then, so that's going down in flames. And then the third one is that his book literally states, I quoted it in one of my videos years ago. These videos go back 6 years ago. That's when I first read that book. So, in that video, what he does is he goes exactly against the thesis of my second book. So, there's a statement, direct quote statement, where he says, the devolving of the church, going away from what we were, as far is not a result of the church embracing liberalism. You see what I'm saying? And my book says the exact opposite. My book says, no, that's exactly why we're where we're at. You see what I mean? And so
I was telling Carly, they knock on legalism like that.
Yes.
Legalism surfaced because of a loss of focus.
Yeah.
Entire sector.
Yeah, so he's going to be hammering fundamentalism, and he's trying to throw out all baby with the bathwater, all of it, which would include pre-trib. Pre-trib is kind of like 6. There's always 5 elements of fundamentalism, and they always point out those 5, and because they want to ignore eschatology, but there's really a 6th one, which is pre-trib, premillennialism. They want to throw that out too. Okay, so those are the things, and then if you go through that book, otherwise you're going to be fine. It's going to give you some facts about certain things, certain Christians in our history and stuff, and that's all right, to go through that. It's a history, but those major problems though, and why they do that, it doesn't make sense. I don't understand the connection between killing pre-trib and telling them the history of the Church of Nazarene. All right, so it doesn't make any sense to why they did that. All right, so anyway, let's pray, and then we'll go into our stuff today. Lord, thank you for just all the ways that the truth is preached here, and that we're ahead of our times because of that, and because you help us, Lord, and we lean on you, and we don't lean on our own understanding. We go in deeply into your word, Lord, and we find the fundamental truths. Lord, I'm so beyond just the basics with this group that I literally was going to give a shout out today. I was going to put it on Facebook or something, just say, if you want to be on the leading edge, or whatever you want to say, of theology, then you need to pay attention to these Sunday schools. I think it's true with what Lee teaches. I think it's true with what Mom preaches at Guy's Kitchen. I think it's true with what we do here in this church in general, but I think it's really true too in Sunday school. I think you've given and Thursday or whatever, because I think you give us, is it Thursday or Tuesday now? Tuesday now. anyway, I think you give us insights that people don't know about and they're not hearing, and they correct error. So help us with those things, and thank you for our church, and help all those that are suffering again with ailment, illness, physical things that are going wrong. Lord, it seems like the devil just won't lay off. There's always something. I pray each family would be blessed and not go through that difficulty. And I pray for the teens, Lord, as they're going through their Sunday school. I know Brad's trying to conquer some tough territory. He has to bridge Old English between Adam Clark and Wesley and kids. And then he has to deal with different personalities, Lord, that have different interest points. And, Lord, that'd be a task, and I just pray that you help him, because he wants to share Clinic of Christian Perfection with them, and it's a great effort, it's a great aim. And I pray you help him in that, in Jesus' name. We pray, amen. I'm going to need my hands, so I'm going to pull this thing down, even though it's going to cause some mess. Probably need to have this little stand here so I can hold this thing as a concentration point of this morning. All right. It's kind of like the heavy guy jumping in the pool. When he says, don't put too much water in these things, they never make these things tall enough. They almost look like they're up there, but they're not, so I'm always doing this a little bit, Try doing that for an hour straight, just makes it, anyway. Okay, so we got some breakthrough ground today, and I'm just going to tell you right away. So I was watching Dr. Ice, and he has some videos, and some of them go, do you know who Dr. Thomas Ice is? I ran into him through his encyclopedias, and I bought some copies of those, and if you want one, those books on that shelf are for taking. You don't take them and then bring them back. You put your name in them and go into them, get into the works and understand. But those guys have a different view from two different things, Calvinism and dispensationalism. And they usually go hand in hand, But there are certain points from dispensationalism that we've gleaned, which is okay. Like, we do believe that the church technically is separated from Israel. If you're trying to understand end times, one of a major point that's the difference between us and all the other views is they think they're the same thing. They think Israel and the church are one and the same. They want to replace Israel with the church. So the church is also, Israel is also figurative. And, they get that from the one reference that says in the New Testament that, it's not just a Jew inwardly, a Jew, you're a Jew inwardly. But they want to replace the church, the whole future description that the New Testament gives us, okay? Dr. Ice was teaching, and he's going through people who are pre-Darby. So we know John and Darby. Guys, by the way, I've been reading Darby this week, and it's been fun. Guess what church? Okay, so to go into a little bit of benefit so you understand where I'm at. One of the things why you're on the cutting edge, so to speak, is because when I told this stuff to Dr. Kenneth Collins, he checked out in the conversation, okay, and I believe he's very equipped. I think he knows a lot about everything, and I revisited his book because somebody pointed out that in 2000, I think it was 7, he wrote a book. I forgot the title of it because I was so focused on the subtitle, so it's kind of like the second part of it is Holy Love and Shape of Grace, but the first part is actually the title. I think it's just John Wesley's Theology or something like that. And he often has books titled like that, very simple. But if you go to page 200 or something like that, he has 203 to 205, something like that. He has a little section where he summarizes what he thinks is the end times view of Wesley, and I don't agree. He says he was a post-millennialist, okay? And I knew that. I knew that from his teachings. You can find free teachings I told you guys about in the last month or so online, and so you can watch those. And it's helpful because he knows a lot. You'll feel like you moved in with John Wesley to listen to Collins. Okay, he's not going to make you a Christian, so to speak, retard. Where you don't know what you're talking about. He's going to help you mainly across the board. But what I like about him and some other scholars is that they're more fair. You cannot just tag Wesley as a postmillennialist. If you do, you're just being false. Okay, you have to admit that he lifelong held on to premillennialism. So there's all kinds of versions. This guy, this week I found so many things. I've delved into so many things. One is a young guy. He's probably about half my age. I'd say 20 something. And I think he saw my videos and he referenced them because he said, there's somebody on here that's telling everybody that Wesley and Bengal and all these guys are premillennialists. And he's like, they didn't do their homework. And it's like, so I wrote it. I wrote him a little paragraph, about this line, just giving him some glimpses into what he hasn't studied. He has no idea what he's talking about. And because he wants to take the easy out. There's too many easy outs. There's an easy out to say he's a post-millennialist. There's an easy out to say he's a double millennialist. That's what he was doing in his whole video. He's a dual millennialist. He believes in two millenniums back to back. And nobody believes that way. And there's just few people, and Bagel was one, and he was one. No, honestly, that's just a cop-out. It's too easy. You see what I mean? And so what's so fair about Collins is in that book, he says, though there are premillennial elements, see what I mean? Even in the sentence when he says it, he says he's a post-millennialist in his final, when it's all said and done. Okay? I disagree with his conclusion, but at least he's fair enough to admit that you cannot just do this. It's too hard. Okay? There's too many questions unanswered and too many things that make it, more balanced in our direction. All right, so reading Darby, that's what Church Darby was, a part of. If you don't know anything about John Darby, he left the church. Okay, he got angry with the church. So he got saved, in his 20s. And, he was a lawyer before that. And then he immediately goes into focus in a Christian university, wants to study. You know what I'm saying? And while he's going through the Church of England, guys, that's the answer. You see what I mean? What church was Wesley a part of? Hello? Church of England. I told you I'm onto something. All right. Guess, by the way, there's only the second most famous name next to John Darby is Irwin, or Irving, I mean, sorry. And you might have heard of the Irvingites. And they criticized them. But this man, his name, Irving, his last name, he started a group. They were more, people always start more in line, and then they tend to veer off, later in life. And so Irving ended up where Darby had to take chops at him later in his life because his Christology, which is the study of how he believed about Christ, wasn't accurate. Okay, and of course, guys, I told you, what I used to like about VeggieTales is they have a song in one of the VeggieTales that says Darby's our hero, and he is our hero. Okay, you see what I'm saying? God used him in this end day to bring it up to par. Okay. But when Dr. Ice is trying to show you guys, he says, we found 7 or 8 other individuals. I'm giving you the synopsis of his video, He says there's 7 or 8 guys that we found in history, in the Dark Ages and so forth, that believe pre-trib premillennialism. See, everybody will say there's some form of premillennialism. And, what they tend to do is they blanket everything. They'll say, oh, they're mostly historicists, premillennialists. And we kind of seen that talked about in the last few weeks, where they don't believe a literal tribulation. They think it's a long period of all throughout church history where the papal church is being bad. And so it's a persecution. Do you see what I'm saying? It's figurative, not a real tribulation week. So are they going to go with what Lee taught about the other day, about the 70 weeks? Do you see what I'm saying? Are they going to go to the point where there's a break in the 70 weeks, and that's the Gentile age that we're in right now, and it's going to be ended with the rapture? And no, they're not going to go there. See what I mean? Because they think the tribulation's been going on all along. Okay, so what's so interesting is Dr. Thomas Ice, he's the head of the Pre-Trib Center, and they come out of Dallas, okay, and they're backsliding. And so he knows that. Just like see what I mean? You can't find anybody. This is the best place for pre-trib arguments. They've been doing debates, like I said, in generations of teachers. I've watched where Dr. Ice is this little, young man sitting on the stage while he's watching the pros go at it. You see what I mean? And now he's the pro, and he's been holding his own for years and years in debates. He debated the pre-wrath men. He's destroyed them. If you guys are open to that idea, that's the newest view. And it's only from the 1980s. Do you see what I'm saying? Newest view. And so it's wrong. And you just know it. And basically, to summarize it, it's 3/4 trib. You're going to go through the whole tribulation period, and the 3/4 through, you're going to get raptured out. And it doesn't make any sense. Because you have to make figurative the tribulation period, which is a lie. You're making God a liar. God said it's the worst thing that hasn't come. It hasn't come yet. Jesus came in his day. And so there's a lot of corrections he's doing in that. I showed you that the other day. One of them, I mentioned it to you, but I didn't make the name. Okay, I said that the realized eschatology. That's one way of saying it. But the more famous name for it is preterism. Okay, so you can watch Dr. Ice debate those guys. They believe everything was fulfilled by AD 70. Okay, so when you get to Matthew 24, that's their favorite passage. You know, this generation will not pass away till all these things are fulfilled. Also, the whole gospel went to the ends of the earth. That's in that passage. Antichrist showed up in the middle of the tribulation week. That's in that passage. Do you hear what I'm saying? Earthquakes and all these things, and the sun turning dark and the moon. You see what I mean? Huge things that never happened in history. So and so it's fun. Okay, so I'm trying to get to it. Okay, but he goes through at least 4 of those individuals. And it's kind of sad to me because it was in 2011 when Dr. Ice made this video. And I've read his books before that, when I put my book out by 2009. All right, I had already read his books, big old books on, who he would summarize as people who believe in RV. But he was backing out of it. In the 2011 video, he was saying, well, the early church didn't believe that. Guys, that's not true.
That's not true.
He was saying they're premillennialists. Okay, but he was saying that they were underneath persecution of the Roman Church, and so he thought they were already in the tribulation, and they were making it figurative, and they were thinking Christ was just going to come and get them out. You see what I mean? So it'd be some kind of post-trib idea. And Dr. Ice doesn't believe that usually, but the sway of modern attack, which is against him, do you see what I'm saying? There's nobody who's going to tell him otherwise. And the only people, he has people in his camp. He knows Ken Johnson. He's ministered with him. Ken Johnson's one that's shown you. Mom's coming here and shown you. He's the best on the early church. You don't need Dr. Ice when it comes to early church.
Right.
Because that's not true. Okay? We could show you that these guys were pre-trib. And like I already told you, most of them were not historicists. There's only like 3 that you can even claim that way. Okay? That started making the tribulation period this figurative, long, drawn-out thing that took a lot of history after Jesus came. You see what I mean? And so that's not accurate either. Okay? So moving on, so we go through these different individuals. He gives about 4 that he still qualifies as people who did pre-trib, okay, prior to Darby. And guys, that's exciting to me because he's basically, we're playing that game. What's the old game where you have ships and you're hiding behind a battleship, okay? And he's sitting there putting out these bombs on these boats, and I'm hoping he hits a Methodist. That's all I'm hoping. See what I mean? I don't really care that there's a bunch of Calvinists. And you got to remember, there's so many skews that Dr. Ice is going to use to study. He won't look at Wesleyans. He hates them. He's a Calvinist. He's a hyper-Calvinist. Do you hear what I'm saying? He's the king of Calvinists. He believes once saved, always saved. He believes that God preordained you to heaven or hell. He believes all that stuff. So he's not going to touch a Wesleyan with a 1,000-foot pole. So he's only looking at history. So he can't find. He says there's 7 or 8 guys. There's so many more. You hear me? But what's so interesting, this is what I was starting off with, was he says some things I've known for a long time like he does. This is 2011. He made that video. I was using it by 2011. See, there's some miracles online for nerds. And for you, any of you can do it now. It's called Google Books. You look it up. All you got to do is type in Google Books, and then you start doing word searches related to whatever you're trying to figure out, okay? And you have access, like the scholars do, to almost everything. It might change. You know how they're trying to make you pay for everything over time. So far, this has been free since way back. It's 2024 now. All right, I've been using this all the time. And last night, it solved the problem, okay? Again. And he was talking about how he has one scholar who hasn't published his book yet. He's a young buck, and he wants credit for what he researched, but he's found 3 more. But I can't tell you guys the names, according to, back in 2011, because I'd take all his credit away. So I have to wait till he publishes the book. What was the man using? Google Books, okay? And he had one other website. And those, a lot of them we have to associate with and so forth. So I tend not to do that if I don't have to. I don't like getting my information associated with other things that, because there could be other avenues to stuff that you don't really want. But this one's safe, okay? So you can go there all the time. So there's something called the Methodist Quarterly Review. Uh-oh. And guys, see, this is cool because this is, they used to just take articles, and sometimes, unfortunately, the one we have, the one I'm using this morning, that destroys somebody's whole point, doesn't have the article's name. Who wrote it? Because I have some of these things at my home. They started doing it again in the American Holiness Movement. They get together and it'd be like, Lee, you come and you write on this, and who's good at math in here? You write on math, and because I want pure writings, and it can be educational and everything. But this is what we're going to do, and I want people reading this. This is back in the day when people read. People really did read. You hear me? I mean, you're opening up the part. So there's a section in these on theology. There's a section in these on math. There's a section in these on educational stuff, right? And other important stuff like politics, okay? So guys, of all places, the first one I get is the Methodist Episcopal Church South, okay? The quarterly review for the Methodist Episcopal Church South. That means they believed in slavery. And by the way, if you didn't know, that was the dividing issue in the Civil War. Just read it. They'll talk about it. He has to, when he gives his intro in the 1844 version, he's telling, which is right after the split of the Methodist Episcopal Church in 1840, okay? He's telling you, let's not get on politics, but we are going to get on politics. Do you hear what I'm saying? But we're going to love our northern brethren anyway, and see what I mean? And he tells you, his defense of slavery and so forth. But I want you to hear that this is a bishop of the Methodist Episcopal Church. It's important, all right? And so he wrote, or he allowed somebody else to write, okay, an article, and this is in 18, guys, this is key. The date is important, all right? It's right around the time of Darby. And 18, I think it's 44. Let me check it out. I think I highlighted it in yellow so I can't lose it. 1847, okay? January of 1847. So it's the quarterly review of the Methodist Episcopal Church South. His name is H.B. Bascom, D.D. LLD. Now, that means that he was given a doctorate. Okay, he didn't earn it. He had a basic education, but he ends up doing a lot of things in the church over time, and they honor him. All right, and they give him a doctorate. He's a premillennialist. Okay, obviously, I wouldn't care about something else. All right, and his full name is Henry Bidelman Bascom. Okay, 1796 to 1850. He was an American bishop of the Methodist Episcopal Church South, elected in 1850. In this, he allows, now there's different articles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they're Roman numerals. Well, one of them is Article 9. And here's the title of it, The Glorious Epiphany. Okay? And guys, that's all you gotta do. Just look at the titles at the entrance to because these are the writings that they're promoting. He's telling you, I'm telling you, the first 10 pages are pretty drawn out. It's kind of like me giving you a whole lecture on why we need to write these writings and how good they are compared to the nonsense that's around. You hear what I mean? So he's basically going, I really give my stamp of approval to what's in this book. You hear me? As a bishop. And this causes a major problem because today, hey Amanda, did you send it to me? One of the key writings, false writings that book's based on is Paul M. Bassett.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Not to say he's a bad historian in the Church of Nazareth. We usually have generally good historians, and Bassett was a good one. He has books where he follows holiness teaching from the first century on. You see what I mean? And he'll give you church fathers in paragraphs, and he'll put little explanatory subtitles, and sometimes he'll give a little context to it. And he'll give a brief little taste of each church father and when they taught on perfection. See what I mean? And so he didn't do all things bad, all right? But he did this wrong. This writing is probably his most influential writing, and it's wrong. All right, it's called the Fundamentalist. There it is, that word they like to throw at us. Okay, Lebanon.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
And by the way, that was a promotional for Donald Trump. Vote for Donald Trump. Okay. Anyway, sorry, Amanda's Fund's been doing that since he left office 1 year ago, and so it's time to change that. But and all those other little beeps online, I don't even know. I can't help you with that. But anyway, so going back at it. So what I'm trying to tell you, Paul M. Bassett wrote this article in the Wesleyan Theological Journals in 1978, and it's ruined everybody's stand on anything fundamentalist in the Church of Nazarene, and it's a betrayal of our original stand. Chapman said we were fundamentalists. If you want to know anything about fundamentalism, just go to Brad. Brad will talk to you day and night about it. He'll talk to you about the inspiration, teaching, and by the way, Brad, this is an excellent source, if he watches this later, an excellent source for arguments about inspiration way back in the Methodist Church, in the Methodist Episcopal Church. Now, why does this matter? Let me make it simple for you. Our parent movement, where did the Church of Nazarene come from? Came from the American Holiness Movement. But the problem for him is he's pointing fingers in that title and in the whole paper, the article, at the American Holiness Movement, and he's suggesting by the title and the paper that they started something that wasn't already there. He's saying that we were already teaching a different way. We were probably not leaning towards a high level of inspiration, which is a lie. You see what I mean? Let's go through the 5 points. We weren't people that believe you have to understand that Jesus died and resurrected from the dead. See, these are evangelical points of truth that are fundamental to the Christian gospel. You see what I mean? We are fundamentalists. If you're not a Christian. Do you see what I'm saying? We're just not fundamentalists in the sense that they've added since then, which is Calvinists. Okay? We're not dispensationalists. We're not Calvinists. Okay? And so we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and they're always trying to do this. So what he's suggesting is that somewhere along the line, holiness people start paying attention to Darby. So this is the false history that they're presenting, and that book follows that. That they started listening to Darby instead of being with him from the word go. You know, he came out of the Church of England. You hear me? So did Irving. All these people were right there where Wesley had ministered 100 years later. We're talking about his what's so cool about Dr. Rice is he gives you those cool little facts about Darby that nobody else can get, okay? So let's go back to that before I tell you what that article says, okay? Darby in 1828 came to the idea of the pre-trib rapture. Guys, that's key. You might want to write that down. When people are trying to say that when did it start, he came to the idea himself in 1828. That was private, okay? He didn't publish anything about it till later, all right? All right, so, and then he was, at first he was a 3.5-year tribulation person. If you study old school theology, I told you Wesley himself didn't even know there was a 7-year period. At first, they only saw the 3.5 years. Do you see what I mean? And so there's no problem with that. And eventually, Darby came to the 7-year period, okay? And that was in 1843 or 1845 when he started seeing that there was a 7-year tribulation period. And so, guys, when you read that, that's not going to be a problem. All you have to do, and so what's so cool is when Dr. Rice starts, he says there's a scholar who came out of Dallas, backslid, from their fundamental teaching. And he's sitting there scolding his own group. He's a scholar standing in front of scholars, and he goes, "Why'd you guys let him through?" And you hear silence in the room. And he goes, you knew he didn't believe in the rapture. He went and presented a dissertation afterwards and came against it. You said, why'd you let him through? And there's just, you can hear crickets going in the room, as they don't know how to answer because they're changing, okay? But that's my whole point, is that this is going on across the board. It's not just in our denomination. There's an pre-trib movement that's trying to undo what's now established in American minds, okay? Because the top theory on end times is our view in the populace,
right?
Okay, but scholarship is trying to move away from it because they start to criticize, and that's the way it tends to go. It usually starts. The problem is as Dr. Rice says in his teaching, is he says if the schools get the wrong teaching, he says they're one generation from losing it.
Exactly.
Because they will teach everybody false, and then everybody will come out of their schools teaching false. Exactly. Okay, and that's what's going on today. And that's why holiness is always one shot away from being lost to another. And by the way, the Roman Catholic Church, and he summarizes it. This is what's so cool about Dr. Rice. He knows things. You guys, he studies this more than your dad, more than your mom, more than your family. He's lived this his whole life. That's all he talks about. That's all he does. All right, so 1,200 years, he said the church. It's not 1,000 years. We call it the devil's period, the devil's millennium, the dark ages, 1,000 years, right? When he said 1,200 years, the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church, which we don't tend to add in there, and others, they silenced. It was illegal to teach premillennial view. So when you sit there and go through the church fathers and everybody and try to find it after the church fathers, when Augustine started the amillennial view and it became the Roman Catholic Church's view and they enforced it, you're not going to find it. It was illegal. You see what I'm saying? Not to mention, and guys, this is another cool fact. Let me throw it in here before I say something. That he said that the number of people who could even read during that period of time. Let me see. Somewhere in here. One in 2,500 people could even read. Wow. All right, during the Dark Ages. And so they couldn't read their own Bible. They couldn't verify anything that was being told them. They were just being handed down hogwash. And the church changed the creed, the early creed. I've told you guys all this stuff, okay? And so, it's not that it's not there from the beginning. He's trying to answer the objection, which has been raised against us. If this is the truth, why did it take Darby to see it? Where has it been in church history? And I'm trying to show you. So he says there's four, that bad guy who came out of their school and backslid. He said there's four criteria in order to prove that one of these guys from the early church, anybody, is a pre-tribber. You know? And he said they have to separate between the rapture and the second coming. You know, we even got Dr. Ice calling that two comings. The bad guys always call it two comings. It's not two comings, it's two parts of the same coming. Okay? But, you know, even he was saying it just to try to give you clarity. Okay? And he said, he goes through the other test, guys, Wesley falls into that camp. You hear me? Wesley falls in that camp. He teaches a rapture separate. No, even the bad guy, even Mark K. Olson today will admit that Wesley taught a rapture and is separate from the second coming. Do you see what I'm saying? And we can go through the three other criteria. One of them isn't important, and that was my other point. He tends to put categories on things that you don't need. Dispensationalists is baloney. We don't need that part. We don't need God couldn't do this until then, had different plans of salvation for each person as they were born in different eras. We don't need that. That's not necessary to a right understanding of pre-trib, premillennialism. So if he sees, and he gets too fundamentally rigid because he believes all Christians are going to the rapture, Dr. Ice does, and we don't have to see that. So when you read an early church father and he says, hey, there's Christians, in the next sentence after he just talked about the rapture, who's still left behind, he immediately says, oh, he must be a post-tribber. No. It's funny, even in his own video about an hour in, he admits, hey, we have no issue with that in another context, because we do believe that people are going to get saved after the rapture. That's how he puts it. No, there's people who are saved that got left behind because they're carnal Christians. He doesn't believe in that. He's a Calvinist. You see what I mean? So he disqualifies things you don't need to disqualify. And so he's not a good sieve, or his group. He's got hundreds of paid individuals that do this day and night. You hear what I'm saying? And they're not a good sieve because they're gonna cut out people that aren't ready. So he gives you one clarification. He said there's a group, the Mather brothers, and he's brought them up in earlier books, and he says they're no longer ones I would say taught pre-trib in the Middle Ages. He said because there were more people who thought they were getting out of here before the world blew up. You know what I mean? And so they're called conflagrationists or something like that, where they just kind of they're not getting out of here for the tribulation, but they're getting out of here before 2 Peter 3. So they're putting 2 Peter 3 right after the rapture, so to speak. So he's saying they're not, so he rescinded them or whatever. He said they're not the ones that are in our view. Go ahead.
You know, I so believe we should study this to the nth degree, but I think one of the tests for truth in our day is souls, bottom line souls. Mm-hmm. So, you know, when you said that the teaching, you know, the professors, just like Timothy talked about, get the wrong teaching information, pass it out to the students go preach it everywhere. That's been happening for 30 years or more with holiness doctrine. So if you don't get sanctified, you're not going to be able to discern these things as well. You're not going to be able to pray like we do, so on and so forth, as we've taught. And then, you know, if they also don't want you to preach on hell, but if you don't preach on hell, the souls are not going to be ready. They don't want you to preach on the rapture because then, you know, the devil's afraid the souls will get ready for the rapture. I mean, the bottom line for everything is souls. Mm-hmm. And if you really look, is it going to be healthy for a soul to believe that way? Or is it going to hinder a soul to believe that way? That can be a real test of whether there's truth in it.
And so, I don't think everybody could hear everything Mom said, but Mom was basically saying that the whole point of end times is about souls. And what we also add in as Wesleyans is we say holiness. You know, Mom was even in her last sermon on Friday. She told everybody out there who are, you know, a lot of them are lost or don't have any context to it. She was teaching them about holiness connected with the end times, which Mom taught. What I liked about it when she was first preaching this was she was connecting it more than, well, any voice I could find in our day. Do you see what I'm saying? She was connecting holiness. I would hear her. I mean, she would do her 10 Virgins sermon, and it's you're left behind unless you're an entire sanctified person. Do you guys understand that's the altar call of the scripture? I often say it's the altar call of, so let's go back. We haven't finished everything yet, okay? We're putting a puzzle together. You got to follow me. Okay, so the American Holiness Movement is our parent movement. We came right out of them. In 1908, we became a church. Really, it was 1895. Okay, but guys, the American Holiness Movement, let's put some dates on it. We've studied this before, okay? Most people would say late, they would say 1880 sometimes to the early 1900s, okay? Some people call it the Third Great Awakening, and they try to bury it with Pentecostalism and so forth, and they were directly associated. And by the way, the Irvingites, which we were talking about this morning, which you've never heard about yet, the only reason they fault them was because they were more charismatic. Do you see what I'm saying? In some ways, but you got to watch out for Christology. If they're gonna start shifting in theology on that, it's gonna be a problem. Okay.
Right.
But yes, there is a Wesleyan beginning too, and that's my point. Okay. And remember, I'm over and over again trying to draw Wesleyan sources associated with pre-Darby.
Right.
And I want you to see that what I believe, which is what I told Collins, and I think it blew his mind. I don't think he's ever heard anybody say this stuff, ever. He's never read it. That I believe Wesley started a revival, and he was a premillennialist. And he picked John Fletcher, who was obviously a premillennialist. And this is his earliest biographer's opinion. The first one who ever took a stab at it said he was a premillennialist, not that he was a postmillennialist. I've shown you that Dangle was clearly in his day. Everybody who ever read him, and I told that to our guy, the young buck, 20, whatever he is, he's really polite. I mean, you'll like his videos. It's not, he's just ignorant of all there is there. Okay, it's way harder an issue. I mean, I love Kenneth Brown. Most of you guys' names are Kenneth, so if it's either John or Kenneth. So if you can't remember his first name, it's usually Kenneth or John. Okay, well, Kenneth Brown wrote, and he said, back and forth. He said, this guy, he gives you the first 50 years of opinions inside of the Methodist Episcopal Church, and that's where we got to go. The Methodist Episcopal Church is our grandparent movement. We didn't just jump out of John Wesley. John Wesley wanted to stay in the Church of England. The Church of England is no longer and really God's thing. They're kind of like a fallen off Roman Catholic church. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm not saying people can't be saved in there, just like Roman Catholics can be saved, but it's in spite of the doctrines, in spite of the teaching. I found a book this week, just for instance, when Lee was teaching, I almost said, I don't want to interrupt his teaching, I don't want to bring heresy into his teaching. But, that very day I found that book where it said, do you want your kids Marianized? Or something like that. I'm putting it in my own words. The title said something strange like that. Do you want your baby baptized in Mary's name? You see, this is false teaching. It's heretical. I don't care what you say.
Exactly.
Okay? I was listening to a comedian this week that cracked me up because he talked about Pope John and how they left him out there for 10 days, staking it up. He said, he wasn't involved. And he goes, man, all people stake when they're alive. It's so funny. But he's going on and on and on about that, because he was trying to make a joke out of it, talking about how they wanted to raise money and make money. I don't know if he's anti-Catholic, but I'm not anti-Catholic as I am anti-lies. And it doesn't matter what church it comes through, okay?
Right.
Guys, we as a Protestant body, you can't just disassociate yourself from Roman Catholicism. You can't ignore, the years of the church that we are all one universal church.
Right.
Okay, and so if you're going to the church fathers, you can't do that without borrowing from the Roman Catholic Church history. Okay, so you can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater there. Okay, and there's a lot of qualifiers. I even found them this week, but they're hard to give because there's more trouble by Roman Catholics. It's actually a balanced statement today. I don't care how ignorant you are when you say they were saved even though they're Catholics.
Yes.
You'll always hear that. You'll hear them. That's how the general average Joe, when they're talking about a friend that gets saved, they said their friend got saved, but it was in spite of the fact they were Catholic. It was sad this week because when we were opening up Guy's Kitchen about an hour before, somebody walked by that used to come here. But I told them a few things from this in the Sunday school, and they won't come anymore because of Roman Catholicism. You see what I mean? I had to make it clear. And so it was sad. It was hard to watch 3 souls walking away, but because they didn't want to hear it. You know what I mean? And I was sitting there thinking, I hope in like 10 years, if God tarries, she'll wake up and remember.
She did accept Jesus, so he can still speak to her.
Yeah, but there's a storm in the way as it was going on, and it was sad. All right, so guys, listen. So if the grandparent movement, which the holiness movement came from, is the Methodist Episcopal Church, there's something between John Wesley. So it's John Wesley, the Methodist Episcopal Church. What's the Methodist Episcopal Church? It's when Methodism separated from the Church of England after Wesley died. You see what I mean? It kind of happened at the tail end. Wesley was setting everything up to separate. You know what I mean? He knew, and then the war happened. So God made it happen. You see what I mean? What made us a nation? The Revolutionary War kind of finished this off. And all Church of England men had to go back to England, and or else they were going to be shot on sight. As spies and so forth. There's only a couple that remained. Francis Asbury was one of them. You can imagine what he had to give up and how dangerous that was to him. And basically nobody ever lost their love for him. So what I'm trying to show you is the American Holiness movement came out of that when the Methodist Episcopal Church backslid. And it's really sad because I've shown you guys in a nutshell that a special scholar named Robert Childs tells us when that started. Really it was pretty early. It was like within 50 years of Wesley's death. You see what I mean? They were in 1840, they split over slavery. That's 20-something years before the Civil War. You see what I mean? 20 years before the Civil War. Now, what's the false teaching that goes on in that book? And it's told to us all the time. Falsely. They tell us that before the American Civil War, everybody was post-millennialists. Okay? And they say the war, that one, and then the world wars later, brought everybody over to a more negative view, and that's why people went pre-trib. Okay? And so they're trying to say that theology entirely, all American Holiness people, that's what they're trying to suggest, were post-millennialists before the Civil War, then all of a sudden they started changing their minds. And there are people that change their mind at that time. Do you see what I'm saying? The problem is that this is not the case. And when you combine Paul and Bassett with this constant lie that they're putting out there, that somehow we ran into a bunch of Calvinists, and instead of staying online, that's what they're teaching you, which is false. We went into, veered off for a short little period of time and got leavened, by these goofballs. That's what they're suggesting, Darby and others. And that's what Bassett's telling everybody. And that's why that article it's a favorite. All the scholars quote it, over and over. It's written in 1978, okay? Right in the heyday, of the explosion of, the Jesus movement, the Left Behind series wasn't even written yet, but the pre-runners to that made it all this such a high view in America. Hale Lindsey. Yeah, on and on it goes. They had their impact right then. So this guy is being overrun by the fact that there's such a popularity, and that was before the Left Behind series. The Left Behind series left all books in history in the dust because it drew such a readership from sinners and everybody else. Again, God's confirmation of this. We've had at least 3 mega hitters in the history of America. Well, the first one, Mom's reading it right now. I've seen it at home. It's The Second Coming by...
Which one? I've got about 20 of them.
No, it's the...
Serious.
He was friends with D.L. Moody, who covered all Blackstone. So William Blackstone. Jesus is coming. So his is like his one oratory won all these people. See what I mean? Yeah. So it's a big hitter. Just boom, it hit everybody. I mean, Calvinists, Wesleyans, it went out to California. Guys, California, which is the land of fruit and nuts, became a center of dispensational teaching underneath Darby's stretch and the people that went out that way. Torrey went out there and spent years out there, okay? And so what I'm trying to show you, though, is Blackstone was one of the mega hits. Hale Lindsey was the next big hit. God won't let it go. All these scholars are lying and keep trying to tell you, no. And then it happens again.
Right.
And so the Left Behind series just happened, just left all books in the dust. And you never thought it would happen again. They were claiming the death of the dispensation movement, death of the whole thing. They're doing it again right now. They're claiming it, and all of a sudden God just revives it again.
Yes,
Boom! It's all in front of everybody's. Those videos that I showed you guys, the 4 videos. They're kind of aged now, but they're fun to watch. It's scary to death when I was a kid. Based on this whole idea, the thief in the night and so forth. I had one sitting in our living room full time. So if you can watch them, you can borrow the DVDs from us. But those things keep reviving us. Okay. So what I'm trying to show you is they're saying that we just kind of, for a short little while, just a group of kind of like, they're trying to suggest like middle, not the original Church of Nazarene leaders, but just after them, Phineas Brzee, Chapman, and so forth. They kind of fell into fundamentalist leavening, but we need to get it out. That's what they're trying to act like. See what I mean? Leaven is the idea of sin or backsliding. That's what he's suggesting. Okay, that the denomination, the whole thing got leavened during the American Holiness Movement. And guys, why they didn't want to pin on the American Holiness Movement? Because the devil hates holiness. That's right. And so they're trying to blame it. And so I'm here to kill it again.
Amen.
I was up all week. I couldn't even sleep hard last night. I had mosquitoes helping me out. God sends mosquitoes every once in a while. Tearing my feet up all night. And, so my feet were like tore up. I think Chris left one of the doors open or something. I'll have to get back to that one. But anyway, and so something was just like tearing me up all through the night. So I was like, every time I'd fall asleep. So I'm just sitting there studying this all through the night, okay? But I found our man that I was telling you about, the bishop, okay? And he, under his watchful eye, guys, when you got to understand the time frames here. That's what's so important, right? So that article that's falsely written, it's called Paul and Bassett, Fundamentalist Leavening of the Holiness Movement. Listen to the dates, Lee, this is key. 1914 to 1940. Guys, that's way after it already happened. That's my point. All right? What do you do now, Paul and Bassett? He's in heaven figuring it all out if he went to heaven. You know, he's figuring it all out, okay? And, you know, I'm not God, I don't know. You know, I often question all these guys. I don't know where they go. And they, you know, God says false teachers, you know. I mean, it makes me, I really take that serious. You know, we're going to judge more harshly. So I don't know. I don't know about any of these guys that people let off the hook day and night.
That's true.
Okay? But he says 1914 to 1940. Guys, I'm back in a review, which is a magazine. They use the term Methodist Quarterly Review. It sounds more intelligent. But it used to be called Methodist Magazine. Okay? Basically, it's a conglomeration of writers. And they're saying this is healthy. He's giving you a 10-page intro, restaying it until you fall asleep, you know, and reading that intro, telling you this is a healthier writing that you need to read, okay? And under his watchful eye, he has a man quoting to you, Darby's right-hand man, Irving. Edward Irving. He gives a list of 5 sources. One of them, so let me give you that. You guys got me this little text here. All right, so let me burn it at you real quick because we only got 6 minutes. All right. Okay, here's this man's writing. It's called The Glorious Epiphany, the Second Coming. Okay, this theory, postmillennialism, which is the wrong theory, however, is of modern origin. This is the first one I found. I've gone through all these different issues all night. You see what I mean? The very first one I find. And by the way, the key word you need is coming. Look up the word coming because that's how they're going to reference it. All right. However, is of modern origin. It was held by none of the early fathers of the church. We shall endeavor to show that it is not the scriptural doctrine, that no such season of perfect peace and universal virtue is to be expected before, that's postmillennialism, the second advent, that the second advent is not to follow, but to precede and introduce the millennium. Okay? So he's arguing right away, underneath the watchful eye of the bishops, who's enjoying this and putting it out in front of everybody, in the key years when Darby's work is coming out. You see what I mean? That's why I'm focused on these years, all right? So this is 1847. I told you that Darby was publishing his stuff in 1840s. All right, so, and Irving, so I read a special historian who, he's trying to answer the question. They always relate Darby and Irving. You always find them do it. And you know, so why? Did they ever meet each other? And the guy tries to answer that question. He wrote a whole paper on it. And he said, yeah, Darby for sure ran into Irving because he at least corresponded with him by letter. They might have met. They might have been at those early councils that I told you guys about in the sort of teaching. You know, there's a lot of people that suggest this, but we couldn't find firsthand proof that they're both at those early, remember the things that led to where Darby platform is teaching. And so they believe they were there. But anyways, he said it's more than likely that Darby was influenced by Irving, not the other way around. Because we can clearly tell you that Darby read Irving's writings. All right? And so it's interesting how close those guys were. By the way, both of them came out of the same church where Wesley was at. Okay, so I just read you, that's just a summary quote, guys. It's actually about 10 pages long. You should read through it. It's really cool. Sounds just like us, word for word. Here's his suggested source of reading, and this is what I look for, okay? Sermons on the Second Advent of Our Lord Jesus Christ by Reverend Hugh McNeil. By the way, Hugh McNeil is the third biggest person in the Darby movement. Okay, I'm just telling you guys, all right? And then that's the first one he tells you, and this is suggested reading by the Methodist Episcopal Church in their whole denomination, spread all over the world. You see what I'm saying? And the bishop has gone, I like this. Now you got a real problem. Because it happened way before the fundamentalist leavening of the American holiness movement. Exactly. It was already there. What are you going to do? Say the fundamentalist leavening of before the fundamentalist movement was even around? Hello? Okay. So this is before the American holiness movement. This is before the Civil War. Their stuff is gone. It doesn't make any sense. It's a lie. All right? So the second one on the list is the premillennial advent of Messiah demonstrated from the scriptures by William Cunningham. Cunningham is cool, guys. He's the one that loves this stuff. He's directly interacting with Irving's writings. He has about 30 books, and 2 of them, I have them here. He's saying, I want you to read Edward Irving, okay? Because I'm reading him. And this is the suggested source by the Methodist Episcopal Church. So he's telling you to go to the second in charge of preacher premillennialism under Darby. All right? This is direct link, okay? And then the Coming of Messiah in Glory and Majesty translation of Ben Ezra by Reverend Edward Irving. So now we have the second. He's pointing right to his writings, okay? And the last one is Babylon and Infidelity Foredoomed of God by Irving, same guy. All right? Third on the list was Cunningham of Laneshaw. He was a Scottish landowner known as writer on biblical prophecy, directly interacted in his writings with Edward Irving. He's basically second to Darby, as I told you. That historian I told you about was David Malcolm Bennett. And so here's the books. Listen to it. The Scheme of Prophetic Arrangement of Reverend Edward Irving and Mr. Freer critically examined. So he's critically examined the second in Darby teaching. And he wants all Methodists to pay attention to that. He wrote his own books on that. Okay? The next one is Strictures on Certain Leading Positions and Interpretations of Edward Irving's Lectures on the Apocalypse. One last thing, because we're over time, and so this is just for fun extra credit. This is the earliest discipline that I have of the Methodist Episcopal Church. I got a bunch of these. And this is 1892, so quite a bit later. But if you look at who's in charge, so there's a bad name in charge. Miley's theology was the second bozo, as I called him. The one that led us away because he taught, quite a few things, like a weak form of the atonement, on it goes. So this is when the church was backslid, Methodist Episcopal Church. But we have a whole list of names of the bishops right here. And I was going down one of them, and I think it's Thomas Bowman, might be the one. I'll have to double check it with you guys, or maybe, I think it was Thomas Bowman, or maybe it was one of these other ones. But Bowman is the one who warned. He was friends with Abraham Lincoln. This is just cool. The guy died in 1914. All right, so he's 97 years old. And so, and both he and the one we were just reading from ended up, as Methodists, ended up being the chaplains for the entire Congress in the church, in America. You see what I'm saying? They're chaplains. Both of them shared that influence. So I thought that was awesome. But he was friends with Abraham Lincoln and warned him that he saw the guy snooping around that tried to shoot him, and Abraham laughed it off. So I just thought that was cool. That's just extra credit for you guys to show you something about Methodist history. That's kind of cool. That shows you how influential these people are. Okay, they're not dummies. And they were treasure troves, and they were around a long time. I didn't get to get into his views on end times, that's what I was looking for, but we'll find that out later. Yeah, let's pray. But do you guys think that's kind of cool?
Oh, yeah.
What do you call it now? Is it a fundamentalist leavening that American holiness movement messed up, or is it something that was already there? And they were telling you in the Methodist Church, and that was the grandparent to our movement. Right. You see what I'm saying? That the American holiness movement wasn't around yet. They're false teaching. Right. They just want to angle everything and make you not listen. Right. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for your help. I thank you for what you help us with. I know this stuff is new to our church and to anybody who they would hear it and they learn from it. Lord, I pray help them in their studies. I pray in Jesus' name.